Could the Steelers be targeting cornerback in round one of the 2024 NFL Draft? I'll answer that question today on Steelers Talk. Then we'll also talk about what exactly is the plan at the center position for the black and gold heading into 2024. And then we'll finish up today's show with a top 30 visit tracker. Going to let you guys know every single player the Steelers are bringing in for pre-draft visits to this point in the process. But before we get into today's news and rumors surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers, my bosses have told me that we need to get 1,000 comments on a singular video during this month to have a big giveaway for the NFL Draft. So do me a favor right now, get down there and spam draft down there in the comments section to help us get to 1,000 comments on today's show so we can have that big giveaway. All right, so let's shift to today's top story, which is that the Steelers seem to be having some pretty heavy interest in some of the top corners in the 2024 NFL Draft, indicating that they might go target a corner in round one. And specifically here, the guy that they have really honed in on is Clemson Tiger cornerback Nate Wiggins. Now, Wiggins is somebody that is extremely highly touted. He is somebody that ran a 4.29 40-yard dash time. He has elite speed. And if you look at what the Steelers are doing in terms of all the different things and all the research that they're doing on Wiggins, he's really checking all the boxes in terms of a first-round selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if you take into account the history of the players that the Steelers have taken. So they met with him formally at the NFL Combine. Then both head coach Mike Tomlin and GM Omar went to his pro day there in Clemson. Of course, they had a pro day dinner the day before the pro day, and now he has been sent to Pittsburgh for a pre-draft visit. And these are usually the four criteria the Pittsburgh Steelers use in order to draft a player in the first round of the NFL Draft. Now, my scouting report on Wiggins is I do have a round one grade on him. He is not my number one cornerback prospect this year. That honor goes to Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo, but the long speed is elite, 4.29, so he has that recovery speed that you want in your number one lockdown corner. You're not going to beat this guy deep. The short area quicks are really good as well, and that really shows in really how clean his man and zone coverage skills are. Doesn't really hold all that much too, so he's somebody that is really impressive in coverage. However, he is too light. He's only 172 pounds, and the team that he ends up going to is going to be asking him to put on weight. And then the big question for me is, if he adds weight, is he going to get slower? Now, that's not a huge concern of mine, but that is something to monitor. Also, he doesn't have the best arm length in the world, so the Steelers like to do press jam coverage at the line of scrimmage with like Joey Porter Jr. If they're going to be asking Nate Wiggins to do that, I'm not sure if that's going to be his thing in the National Football League. And then also, Wiggins has had a tough time staying healthy. He got hurt running the 40-yard dash at the Combine, right? He had that hamstring issue. Now, it seems like he's going to be fine, all these different things. I do think he is a bona fide round one prospect, but, is this the type of guy where if he gets to number 20, you're going to forego getting an offensive lineman? Personally, I don't think that, but hey, man, you can't deny that the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing a lot of research in some of the top cornerback prospects in this year's NFL Draft. And it's not just Wiggins. They're also taking a good hard look at the two Alabama corners that are expected to be round one guys in Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. The only thing on that checklist that we showed you before on Nate Wiggins that these two guys haven't had is a top 30 visit. So if the Steelers end up bringing either Kool-Aid or Terrion Arnold in for a top 30 visit, they would join the same class as Nate Wiggins and Amarius Mims as the only two players that have fit all four of those criteria that the Steelers usually use to make their first round selection. Now, what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. Should the Pittsburgh Steelers target a corner in round one of this year's NFL Draft? Give me a yes or a no for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. When that happens, take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question with a yes or a no. So my take on that question, guys, is I would probably rather spend a round one pick on an offensive tackle as opposed to a cornerback. And the reason for that is that you don't need a number one corner, all right? Usually if you're using a first-round pick on a corner, it's to be that number one lockdown guy for the future. Now, if you can have two lockdown guys, that's even better, and that might be the thinking for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but you definitely need another tackle on the other side of Broderick Jones on the offensive line. This is going to be an offense heavily dependent on the run game, so you need to have two good tackles. And I think that you can get a really good number 2 cornerback option on day 2, whether that be a slot cornerback, whether that be a true outside corner as the number 2 option, and you move Dante Jackson into the slot. You have a lot of options if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers at this position. And these are 10 guys that I think you could take on day 2, and I'd be perfectly okay with it. TJ Tampa in round 2 would be a really good fit for this system. Mike Sanderstrom out of Michigan is one of my Sperry psychos this year. He is unbelievable as a player. He's going to be one of the best slot defenders in the NFL from the word go. I like Ennis Rakestraw out of Mizzou as well. Good versatility. Can play zone and man, even though he's a little bit undersized. Kyrie Jackson, super physical corner. I think that he's being a little bit undervalued right now. Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky had a top 30 visit with the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. A little bit undersized, but really savvy corner. Same thing with Renardo Green out of Florida State. Jerrion Jones is a guy that can play in the slot. And then keep your eye on Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest. Good size, good arm length. He's got an NFL caliber body. When you look at a starting cornerback in the National Football League, I think he's going to go in round 3. Now, coming up here, what exactly is the plan for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the center position? They cut Mason Cole. They haven't signed anybody in free agency. Are they really going to go with Nate Herbig, or are they going to address it at some point during this offseason? I'll answer that question here in just a second. But before we get into that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at PrizePicks. And big shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's Steelers Talk video. And they've got specials for new and returning users alike for the Final Four when you head on over to prizepicks.com/CLNS and download the PrizePicks app today. Football season may be over, but the action on the hardwood is just heating up. And whether it's the Final Four this weekend or the fight for NBA playoff seeding, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of the year. Get in on the excitement with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. The Final Four, or March Madness, has now reached its peak with the Final Four just on the horizon this weekend, and you can pick more or less right now to make some money on the biggest stage in college hoops. PrizePicks is simple. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get started now if you haven't already at prizepicks.com/CLNS or download the PrizePicks app today and get a first-time deposit match of $100 when you use the code CLNS at prizepicks.com/CLNS or download the PrizePicks app today. You can pick more or you can pick less. It's that easy with our friends at PrizePicks. So let's talk about the center position here, because at this point, I think we all expected for the Steelers to potentially sign a center or a center in NFL free agency, and it just hasn't happened. And right now, as things sit, not only do you have a pretty gaping need at left tackle or right tackle, depending on what you want to do with Broderick Jones, but I think we all agree Dan Moore Jr. probably not going to be a high-level starter for this team moving forward. And then Nate Herbig, it's like, I like the guy as a backup, but is he really going to be your starting center heading into next year? I certainly don't think so, and I certainly don't trust Spencer Anderson or Ryan McCollum at this point to step into that role. So let me propose something real quick. What if the Pittsburgh Steelers brought back Mason Cole? You can make an argument, other than Connor Williams right now, Mason Cole is the best center option on the NFL free agency market. And at this point, he's going to be super cheap. You could probably get him for maybe even less than $2 million to bring him back as kind of like a bridge center option, somebody that has chemistry with the guys on the offensive line already, and somebody that can be phased out as you bring in a center, in the early rounds of the NFL draft. And for the right price here, I would consider bringing back Mason Cole because, like I said, he has the chemistry. He knows he knows all these different things. And I think you can get him for a really good price at this point. And you can go into the NFL draft with a little bit less of a sense of desperation. But don't get me wrong. Even if you bring back Mason Cole at this point, you have to draft a center for the future. Mason Cole is not going to be your long-term answer. I think the way he played last year really showed us that he is not going to be that kind of guy. But could he be somebody that's a solid backup that has chemistry with the guys on the offensive line already for a very good, very team-friendly contract? That is something that I'm certainly open to at this point in the offseason. But at the end of the day, I do think that it was a good move to get that cap savings by cutting him earlier in the offseason. Now let's shift over to Mel Kiper Jr. and Field Yates here and what they have to say about the center situation heading into the 2024 NFL Draft, where they're saying some of the top center prospects are starting to fall down the boards here of some of the top teams in the National Football League. This is what Mel Kiper Jr. had to say on the First Draft podcast earlier this week. You see where we are with Jackson Powers-Johnson. I see a lot of first-round mocks with him, but most of my friends in the NFL, they are thinking more second round. They don't get some of the mocks. But hey, those mocks are talking to their people. We don't talk to everybody. But I will say on Jackson Powers-Johnson, my intel says second round on him. Okay, and it wasn't just Mel Kiper Jr. that is saying that he's hearing that Jackson Powers-Johnson is going to fall into round 2. Field Yates, his partner on the First Draft podcast, also says that Jackson Powers-Johnson is likely to fall. I mocked Powers-Johnson and Zach Frazier early in the second round, obviously, and the feedback that I have gotten since this mock drop is that both of the centers were too high, both Jackson Powers-Johnson and Zach Frazier. Graham Barton, he's an unimpeachable first-round pick. I might have been too low on Barton with him at 20th overall, but I think that's the range, though, somewhere in the first part of the second half of the first round. So listen, man, it seems like Graham Barton is the only center that is really getting bona fide first-round buzz in NFL circles right now, and it sounds like there's going to be a damn good center waiting for the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 51 overall in the second round here of the 2024 NFL Draft. And just imagine if the Steelers could land Jackson Powers-Johnson, my number 1 overall center in this year's NFL Draft class, in round 2. I mean, most Steelers fans want this guy in round 1. And this guy's the most mocked player to the Steelers at number 20 overall. Just imagine if he falls to number 51, or imagine he falls to like pick 40 to like the 45 range and Omar Khan trades up for him. I think that'd be a great move for GM Omar Khan. I think it'd be great for the Pittsburgh Steelers because I think he is a great fit for what the Pittsburgh Steelers and what new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith want to do at the position. So now let's go over the latest top 30 visit updates here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've met with 20 players unofficial top 30 visits, so they have 10 visits left. They met with Michael Penix Jr. and Dylan Johnson from the Washington Huskies, Roman Wilson, the wide receiver from Michigan, Ricky Pearsall, a physical slot wide receiver from Florida, Xavier Legette, the guy that I've been comparing to A.J. Brown throughout this process, Malachi Corley, the guy that's being compared to Debo and Rashee Rice, Taj Washington, kind of an itty-bitty slot receiver from USC, Luke McCaffrey, the brother of Christian McCaffrey, a wide receiver, Travis Glover, the day 3 offensive tackle prospect. Both Talisi Fuaga and Amarius Mims have had visits here as well. Expect those guys to be top first-round draft targets for the Steelers. Matt Goncalves from the Pitt Panthers here. A couple Pitt Panthers, actually. MJ Devonshire, the corner, also has had a top 30 visit. Stephen Jones, the guard from Oregon. A couple of defensive tackles in Braden Fisk and Christian Boyd. Keep your eye on Christian Boyd in round 4 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way. Darius Robinson is the only edge to get an official top 30 visit here in Pittsburgh. Mason Smith out of LSU, somebody that the Steelers have done a ton of research on. So if he's available in round 4, I think that's going to be the pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Andrew Phillips and Nate Wiggins, who we talked about earlier in today's show. So, and other news here, I do wanted to kind of put this at the end of today's show. The Steelers did make another signing yesterday. Tight end MyCole Pruitt, kind of a good blocking tight end, somebody that is an Arthur Smith guy. All right, he's been in Tennessee when Arthur was there with the Titans, and then he followed him to Atlanta where he was a good rotational piece in that rotation of tight ends. I mean, like I've said on the show before, guys, Arthur really likes to put 2-3 tight ends on the field at one time. I took a tight end in my latest Steelers mock draft because of that reality, and you probably want to have at least 4 tight ends in the room on your final roster. This looks like the 4th tight end option to me, and I think that this signing definitely decreases the chances that the Steelers are going to be taking a tight end during the 2024 NFL Draft. Obviously, Smith likes Pruitt, and of course, you have Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, and Connor Hayward already in the room, so that's starting to get a bit stacked. So I probably wouldn't think that the Steelers are going to take a tight end during the draft this year anymore. Now, let me know down there in the comments section, should the Steelers draft another tight end and make it 5 players in that room that could make the final roster? Type D for draft or type P for pass. At this point in the offseason, I'm probably going to pass on this. I like the 4 guys we have in that room. That'll be it for today's show, guys. I appreciate each and every single one of you that made it to the end of today's show. And if you're a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, I want you to identify yourselves down there in the comment section by typing real one in all caps to let me know that you are a real one. And that'll be it for today's show. Like I said, guys, make sure you click that subscribe button because we got more great Steelers content coming your way this weekend, heading into next week. And, of course, day by day here, we're getting closer and closer to day 1 of the 2024 NFL Draft. So to never miss any of our premium Steelers draft content, make sure you click that subscribe button right now.